walking into a museum and discovering that someone had taken scissors to the Mona Lisa. That's exactly what happened to one of the world's most famous paintings, and the story behind it will shock you. In the heart of Amsterdam, hanging in the Rijksmuseum, there's a massive painting that draws millions of visitors every year. But what most people don't know is that this masterpiece was once brutally cut down, losing entire figures forever. The massive painting is called The Night Watch, and its creator was a man whose life was filled with more drama than Shakespeare could ever have written. Rembrandt van Rijn wasn't just any painter. He was the Leonardo da Vinci of the Dutch Golden Age, a man who could capture human emotion like no one before or since. But his greatest masterpiece would also become his greatest curse, leading to financial ruin, personal tragedy, and one of art history's most shocking acts of vandalism. Let's travel back to 1642, to a time when Amsterdam was the richest city in the world. The Dutch had built an empire on trade, and money was flowing like water through the city's canals. In this golden age of prosperity, wealthy merchants wanted to show off their success, and commissioning a group portrait was the ultimate status symbol. But Rembrandt had other plans. He wasn't going to paint just another boring group photo where everyone stood in a line looking important. No, he was going to create something that had never been done before, something that would revolutionize art forever. The commission came from Captain Frans Banninck Koch and his company of civic guardsmen. These weren't real soldiers, mind you. They were wealthy Amsterdam citizens who dressed up in fancy uniforms and paraded around the city during festivals. Think of them as a cross between a country club and a costume party. Each man paid good money to be included in this painting, expecting to be shown in all his glory. Rembrandt took their money, but he had no intention of giving them what they expected. Instead of painting them standing around looking dignified, he decided to capture them in motion, as if they were actually preparing for battle. The captain is giving orders, a lieutenant is walking beside him, a drummer is beating his drum, and soldiers are loading their muskets. It was like taking a snapshot of a movie scene centuries before cameras were invented. But here's where things get interesting. Rembrandt didn't just paint the guardsmen. He filled the canvas with mysterious figures that weren't part of the original commission. There's a young girl in a golden dress who seems to glow with her own light. Some say she represents the spirit of Amsterdam itself. There are children running between the soldiers, a dog barking at their feet, and shadowy figures lurking in the background. The painting was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was huge, measuring over 11 feet tall and 14 feet wide. The figures seemed to leap off the canvas with a life of their own. Light and shadow danced across the scene in ways that made viewers feel like they were standing right there in the middle of the action. When the painting was unveiled, the reaction was explosive. Some people were amazed by its brilliance. They recognized that Rembrandt had created something extraordinary, a work of art that transcended the simple group portrait genre. Art critics praised his innovative use of light and shadow, his dynamic composition, and his ability to bring static figures to life. But the men who had paid for the painting were furious. They had expected to be the stars of the show, each figure given equal prominence and respect. Instead, some of them were barely visible, hidden in shadows, or pushed to the edges of the composition. The captain and lieutenant dominated the center of the painting, bathed in glorious light, while others were relegated to supporting roles in Rembrandt's dramatic vision. This controversy marked the beginning of Rembrandt's downfall. Word spread through Amsterdam's tight-knit merchant community that the famous painter was difficult to work with, that he cared more about his artistic vision than his clients' wishes. Commissions began to dry up. The wealthy citizens who had once lined up to have their portraits painted by the master started looking elsewhere for artists who would give them what they wanted. Rembrandt's personal life was falling apart too. His beloved wife Saskia had died just months after the Night Watch was completed, leaving him alone with their infant son, Titus. The house he had bought during his prosperous years became a financial burden he could no longer afford. Creditors began knocking at his door, demanding payment for debts he couldn't settle. In 1656, just 14 years after completing his masterpiece, Rembrandt was forced to declare bankruptcy. Everything he owned was put up for sale, including his art collection, his furniture, and even his house. The man who had once been the most celebrated painter in Amsterdam was reduced to living in a rented room in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods, but the Night Watch survived. It found a home in Amsterdam's town hall, where it hung proudly for decades. The painting that had caused so much controversy gradually came to be recognized as a masterpiece. Art lovers traveled from across Europe just to see it, and other painters studied Rembrandt's techniques, trying to unlock the secrets of his genius. Then, disaster struck. In 1715, more than 70 years after Rembrandt's death, city officials decided to move the Night Watch to a new location. But there was a problem. The painting was too big for its new home. The doorway wasn't wide enough, and the wall space wasn't tall enough to accommodate Rembrandt's massive canvas. What happened next will make any art lover's blood run cold. Instead of finding a different location or modifying the building, the officials made a decision that seems unthinkable today. They decided to cut the painting down to size. With scissors and knives, they began trimming away pieces of Rembrandt's masterpiece like they were shortening a tablecloth. They cut strips from all four sides of the canvas, removing entire figures and parts of the composition that Rembrandt had carefully planned and executed. On the left side, they removed two complete figures, including a man loading his musket. From the top, they cut away an ornate arch that had framed the scene. From the bottom, they trimmed away the feet of several figures and a dog that had been running alongside the guardsman. The lost pieces weren't saved or preserved. They were simply thrown away, treated like scraps of worthless cloth. In a matter of hours, centuries of artistic genius were carelessly destroyed. Imagine if someone decided the Sistine Chapel ceiling was too big and just painted over parts of it. That's essentially what happened to the Night Watch. But how do we know what was lost? Fortunately, other artists had made copies of the original painting before it was mutilated. A painter named Gerrit Lundens had created a detailed copy in the 1650s, preserving the image of Rembrandt's complete vision. When art historians compared Lundens's copy to the surviving painting, they could see exactly what had been cut away. The revelation was heartbreaking. The removed figures weren't just random additions. They were integral parts of Rembrandt's composition, carefully placed to balance the scene and guide the viewer's eye through the painting. The arch at the top had provided a sense of architectural grandeur. The dog at the bottom had added life and movement to the lower part of the composition. Without these elements, the Night Watch lost some of its original power and meaning. It was still a masterpiece, but it was a damaged masterpiece, like a symphony with missing movements or a novel with torn-out chapters. The story doesn't end there, though. The Night Watch continued to face dangers throughout its history. During World War II, as Nazi forces occupied the Netherlands, Dutch museum officials feared that the painting might be stolen or destroyed. They carefully removed it from its frame and hid it in a secret bunker, where it remained safe until the war ended. In 1975, the painting survived another attack, this time from a deranged visitor who slashed it with a bread knife. The damage was severe but not irreparable. Master restorers worked for months to repair the cuts, using techniques that would have amazed even Rembrandt himself. They analyzed the paint composition, studied the brush strokes, and carefully filled in the damaged areas so skillfully that today you can barely see where the knife cuts occurred. Then, in 1990, another visitor threw acid on the painting. Once again, expert restorers came to the rescue, neutralizing the acid before it could cause permanent damage and painstakingly repairing the affected areas. Each attack made museum officials more determined to protect this irreplaceable work of art. Modern technology has given us new ways to appreciate the night watch and understand what was lost when it was cut down. Using high-resolution photography and computer analysis, researchers have been able to study every brushstroke of the surviving painting. They've also used artificial intelligence to create digital reconstructions of what the complete painting might have looked like, based on the historical copies and evidence from the cut edges. These reconstructions are fascinating, but they also serve as painful reminders of what was lost forever. No computer program can truly recreate Rembrandt's genius. The subtle variations in his brushwork, the way he built up layers of paint to create depth and luminosity, the almost magical way he captured light, these things can't be replicated by technology, no matter how advanced. What makes this story even more tragic is that the Night Watch wasn't just any painting. It was Rembrandt's most ambitious work, the painting that best demonstrated his revolutionary approach to art. In it, he combined portraiture with history painting, creating a new genre that influenced artists for centuries to come. He used light not just to illuminate his subjects, but as a dramatic force that could direct attention, create mood, and tell a story. The painting technique Rembrandt used was called chiaroscuro, an Italian word meaning light-dark. He would start with a dark background, and then build up his figures with layers of paint, making them emerge from the darkness like actors stepping into a spotlight on a stage. This technique created an incredible sense of drama and three-dimensional reality that made his paintings seem to come alive. But Rembrandt's genius went beyond technique. He was a master storyteller who could capture not just how people looked, but who they were as human beings. In the Night Watch, each figure has its own personality, its own story to tell. The captain is confident and commanding. The lieutenant is eager and alert. The mysterious girl in the golden dress seems to float through the scene like a spirit or an angel. Some art historians believe that Rembrandt included hidden symbols and meanings in the Night Watch. The girl's dress might represent the golden age of Amsterdam. The chicken hanging from her belt might symbolize the defeated enemies of the Dutch Republic. The light that bathes the central figures might represent divine protection over the city and its guardians. These layers of meaning made the Night Watch more than just a group portrait. It became a celebration of Amsterdam's prosperity and power, a work of art that captured the spirit of an entire era. When pieces of it were cut away, we didn't just lose paint and canvas. We lost part of that historical record, part of that artistic vision that can never be recovered. Today, the Night Watch hangs in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, protected by bulletproof glass and the most advanced security systems money can buy. Millions of people visit it every year, making it one of the most viewed paintings in the world. Most of them don't know the tragic story of what was lost, but they can still feel the power of Rembrandt's remaining vision. The painting serves as both a triumph and a warning. It's a triumph of artistic genius, proof that one person's vision can speak to people across centuries and cultures. But it's also a warning about how easily great art can be lost, how one careless decision can destroy something irreplaceable forever. Modern museum practices have learned from the tragedy of the Night Watch. Today, if a painting doesn't fit in a space, curators modify the space, not the artwork. The idea of cutting down a masterpiece to make it fit seems as barbaric to us as it should have seemed to those officials in 1715. But the damage is done, and it can't be undone. We can study the copies, we can create digital reconstructions, we can imagine what the complete painting must have looked like. But we can never again see Rembrandt's complete vision as he intended it to be seen. Here's something that might surprise you, though. Despite everything it has endured, despite the pieces that were lost and the attacks it has survived, the Night Watch remains one of the most powerful and moving paintings ever created. Even in its damaged state, it continues to inspire artists, amaze visitors, and demonstrate the incredible power of human creativity. Rembrandt died in 1669, poor and largely forgotten by the fashionable world that had once celebrated him. He never knew that his controversial masterpiece would one day be considered one of the greatest paintings of all time. He never knew that people would travel thousands of miles just to stand in front of it and try to understand the secrets of his artistic genius. But perhaps that's fitting. Rembrandt wasn't painting for fame or fortune, at least not when he created the Night Watch. He was painting his vision of truth, his understanding of human nature, his response to the world around him. He was willing to risk everything: his reputation, his financial security, his relationships with powerful patrons, for the sake of artistic integrity. The Night Watch stands as a monument to that kind of courage, that willingness to create something new and different even when the world isn't ready for it. It reminds us that true art isn't about giving people what they expect or what they think they want. It's about showing them something they've never seen before, something that changes the way they look at the world. And here's something to think about as you look at reproductions of this masterpiece. Every time you see the Night Watch, you're seeing both a triumph and a tragedy. You're seeing the work of one of history's greatest artists, but you're also seeing what remains after centuries of neglect, vandalism, and careless treatment. It makes you wonder what other masterpieces might be lost forever, gathering dust in attics or rotting away in forgotten storage rooms. It makes you think about how we value art in our own time, and whether we're doing enough to preserve the creative works that future generations will treasure. The story of the Night Watch is ultimately a human story. It's about ambition and disappointment, about genius and misunderstanding, about the eternal struggle between artistic vision and commercial demands. It's about how great art can survive almost anything, including the people who are supposed to protect it. Rembrandt's masterpiece continues to speak to us across the centuries, even in its damaged state. It reminds us of the power of human creativity, the importance of artistic courage, and the tragedy of what we lose when we don't properly value the treasures in our care. The next time you see a reproduction of the Night Watch, or if you're ever lucky enough to see the real thing in Amsterdam, remember that you're looking at both a masterpiece and a mystery. You're seeing what remains of Rembrandt's greatest achievement, but you're also missing pieces of the puzzle that can never be recovered. Those lost figures, that missing architecture, those cutaway details, they exist now only in our imagination and in the faded copies made by other artists. They serve as ghosts of artistic greatness, reminders of what happens when we don't recognize genius until it's too late to properly preserve it. But the Night Watch endures, scarred but still magnificent, damaged but still inspiring. It stands as proof that great art can survive almost anything, that human creativity is stronger than human carelessness, and that some visions are so powerful they can speak to us across centuries, even when they're no longer complete. In a world where we create and consume images at an unprecedented rate, where digital art can be copied and shared instantly, the story of the Night Watch reminds us of the irreplaceable value of original masterpieces. It shows us what we risk losing when we don't properly care for the great works of art that define our humanity and our history.